fear. That's what Sarah felt when she opened her grandmother's letter. Her hands shook as she read the words again and again. "Come to Midnight Manor. I need you. Please don't tell anyone." Sarah's grandmother had been dead for 3 years, yet here was a letter, dated just 1 week ago, in her perfect handwriting. Sarah sat in her small apartment in London staring at the envelope. The stamp was real. The address was correct. Everything looked normal except for one impossible detail. Her grandmother was gone. She had died peacefully in her sleep, or so everyone believed. But now Sarah wasn't sure about anything. She called her brother Tom, but he didn't answer. She tried her cousin Rebecca, who lived in Manchester. No response. Strange. They always answered her calls. A cold feeling grew in her stomach. Something was terribly wrong. The letter mentioned Midnight Manor, the old family house in the countryside, where Sarah had spent every summer as a child. Nobody had lived there since her grandmother died. The house stood empty, waiting like a ghost from the past. Sarah hadn't been back in years. She had too many memories there, both good and painful. But the letter was clear. Her grandmother, or someone pretending to be her, needed help. Sarah packed a small bag and caught the last train heading north. The journey took 4 hours, and with every passing mile, her anxiety grew stronger. Rain began to fall, hitting the train windows like tiny fingers tapping, tapping, tapping. When Sarah arrived at the small village near Midnight Manor, it was almost midnight. How fitting, she thought. The station was empty, and the only taxi driver looked at her strangely when she mentioned the manor's name. "Nobody goes there anymore," he said, his voice rough and worried. "Strange things happen at that place." "What kind of strange things?" Sarah asked. The driver just shook his head and started the car. They drove through dark country roads with trees hanging over them like twisted arms. Finally, they reached the manor. It stood on a hill, dark against the stormy sky. Only one window showed light. A window on the 3rd floor. Sarah's grandmother's old bedroom. She paid the driver, who left quickly, his car disappearing into the night. Sarah walked to the front door. It was unlocked. Her heart beat faster. Why would the door be open? She pushed it slowly, and it made a long, creaking sound that echoed through the house. "Hello?" she called out. Her voice sounded small and scared. No answer. Just silence. Sarah stepped inside. The house smelled old and dusty, but there was something else too, the faint smell of perfume. Her grandmother's perfume. Impossible. The entrance hall looked the same as she remembered. The grand staircase curved upward into darkness. Old paintings of family members hung on the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her movements. Sarah found a light switch, but when she pressed it, nothing happened. The power was out. Using her phone as a flashlight, she moved deeper into the house. The light from upstairs still glowed, which meant someone was using candles or oil lamps. Someone was definitely here. "Tom? Rebecca, is anyone here?" she called again. This time she heard something. Footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps, coming from above. They moved across the ceiling, then stopped directly overhead. Sarah held her breath. Then the footsteps started again, moving toward the stairs. A figure appeared at the top of the staircase. Sarah's phone light caught a face, and she gasped. It was Tom, her brother. But he looked terrified, his face white as paper, his eyes wide with fear. "Sarah," he whispered urgently, "you shouldn't have come. You need to leave now." "What's going on? Why are you here? Did you get a letter too?" Tom hurried down the stairs and grabbed her arm. "Listen to me carefully. Grandmother didn't die naturally. She was murdered. And the killer is in this house right now. Sarah felt the world spin around her. What? That's impossible. The doctor said she died in her sleep. There was an investigation. The investigation was wrong, Tom said, looking over his shoulder nervously. I found evidence. Documents hidden in her room. Letters. She knew someone wanted to kill her, and she wrote everything down. But we're in danger. We need to get out. Before Sarah could respond, they heard a loud crash from the kitchen. Both of them froze. Tom put his finger to his lips, signaling for silence. They moved quietly toward the kitchen door. It was slightly open and light flickered inside. Candlelight. Tom pushed the door open slowly. What they saw made Sarah's blood turn to ice. Rebecca was there, standing over a man's body, blood pooled on the old kitchen floor. In Rebecca's hand was a large kitchen knife, red and dripping. "Rebecca," Sarah screamed, "what have you done?" Rebecca looked up, and Sarah saw her cousin's face was covered in tears. "I had no choice," Rebecca sobbed. "He was going to kill us all, just like he killed Grandmother." The man on the floor groaned. He wasn't dead yet. Sarah rushed forward and knelt beside him. She recognized him immediately. It was James Parker, her grandmother's lawyer. He had handled all the family affairs after her death. "Call an ambulance," Sarah shouted to Tom. "Quickly." "No phones work here," Tom said, his voice shaking. "The signal is blocked. I already tried." James coughed, blood on his lips. His eyes focused on Sarah. "Your grandmother," he whispered weakly. "The will, it was all fake. I changed it, took everything, but she found out. Had to stop her." Sarah's mind raced. Her grandmother had been wealthy. When she died, most of the money went to charity, with only small amounts to the family. Everyone had been surprised, but the lawyer had shown them the will, officially signed and witnessed. Nobody had questioned it. "You killed her for money?" Sarah said, anger rising in her voice. "You murdered a kind old woman for money?" James tried to speak again, but his voice was too weak. Rebecca dropped the knife and collapsed into a chair, crying uncontrollably. Tom stood frozen, his face showing shock and confusion. "We need to get help," Sarah said, trying to stay calm. "Tom, you and Rebecca stay here with him. I'll drive to the village and get the police." "The car won't start," Tom said quietly. "I already checked. Someone cut the wires." Sarah felt panic rising. They were trapped in an isolated house with a dying man and no way to call for help. The storm outside grew stronger, rain hammering against the windows. Thunder rumbled like an angry giant. "Then we walk," Sarah decided. "It's only 3 miles to the village." "In this storm?" Rebecca said, looking up with red eyes. "We'll die out there." "We'll die here if we don't try," Sarah replied. "That man needs a hospital and we need the police." "Rebecca, what you did was self-defense," Rebecca interrupted firmly. "He came at me with that knife. I grabbed it from him. I was protecting myself." Sarah looked at the knife on the floor, then at James. His breathing was becoming more shallow. They were running out of time. "Okay," Sarah said, making a decision. "Tom, help me stop his bleeding. We need to keep him alive. Rebecca, find blankets and dry clothes for all of us. We're going to the village as soon as the storm calms down even a little." They worked together, creating bandages from kitchen towels and applying pressure to James's wound. It was deep, but possibly survivable if they got him medical help soon enough. As they worked, James drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling words they couldn't understand. Sarah searched his pockets and found his phone. Dead battery. But she also found a folded paper. She opened it carefully. It was a letter in her grandmother's handwriting, the same handwriting as the letter Sarah had received. "Look at this," she told Tom, showing him the paper. The letter was addressed to James. It read, "I know what you've done to my will. I've found the original document in your office files. You will return every penny you stole, or I will go to the police tomorrow morning. This is your only chance to do the right thing." The letter was dated the day before her grandmother died. Tom read it twice, his face growing darker. He killed her to prevent her from going to the police, and he made it look like natural death. How? Poison, probably, came a new voice from the doorway. Everyone spun around. Standing in the kitchen entrance was an elderly woman with white hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore a long, dark coat that dripped with rain. In her hand was an old-fashioned oil lamp that cast dancing shadows on her face. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, stepping protectively in front of James. "My name is Margaret Cooper," the woman said calmly. "I was your grandmother's oldest friend, and I'm the one who sent you those letters." Sarah felt her knees go weak. "You? But the handwriting?" "I practiced for months," Margaret said, setting down the lamp. "I had to get you here, all of you, because the police wouldn't listen to an old woman's theories. But I knew you would investigate if you thought your grandmother needed help." "You tricked us?" Tom said angrily. "You made us come to this place in the middle of the night." "I saved your lives," Margaret replied sharply. "James Parker wasn't finished. He was planning to kill each of you one by one to protect his secret. I've been watching him for months, collecting evidence. Tonight was his move. He came here with murder in his heart." Rebecca stood up, wiping her eyes. "How did you know he would come tonight?" Margaret smiled grimly. "Because I told him you would all be here. I sent him a letter too, pretending to be from your grandmother. I said she had hidden evidence in the manor, proof of his crimes. Evidence that would appear in 3 years. Just like her letter to you, he couldn't risk it. He had to come and search for it." "And you wanted us here to witness it?" Sarah said, starting to understand. "To catch him in the act?" "Not just witness," Margaret corrected. "I needed you to defend yourselves. I needed him to make a move so obvious that even the police couldn't deny the truth. Rebecca did what she had to do. She has witnesses now. You and Tom saw him attack her." Sarah shook her head in disbelief. The whole night had been a carefully planned trap. Margaret had used them all as bait to catch a killer. "But my grandmother," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "She really was murdered?" Margaret's expression softened. "Yes, dear. With a slow-acting poison mixed into her evening tea. James was the only person with her that night. He brought her special tea, he said, from a new shop. By the time the poison worked, he was long gone. It looked like her heart simply stopped. At her age, nobody questioned it." Tom knelt down beside James, checking his pulse. "He's still alive, but barely. We need to get him help, even if he is a murderer. We can't let him die here." Margaret nodded. "I've already called the police from the village. They're on their way, though the storm is slowing them down. They should be here within the hour." "You have a working phone?" Sarah said in surprise. "Of course. I lied about the signal being blocked. Had to keep you all here, didn't I?" Margaret pulled out a modern smartphone from her coat pocket. James cut your car wires, just as I expected he would. But my car is hidden down the road. Perfectly fine. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anger. This old woman had manipulated them all, put them in danger, even if it was for a good reason. But she had also solved a murder and prevented more deaths. The next hour passed slowly. They kept pressure on James's wounds while waiting for help. Margaret told them everything she had discovered about the lawyer's crimes. He had stolen nearly £2 million from their grandmother's estate. He had falsified documents, bribed witnesses, and created an entirely fake will. The real will left most of the money to her grandchildren, Sarah, Tom, and Rebecca. Your grandmother was a careful woman, Margaret explained. She kept copies of everything. The original will is hidden in a safety deposit box at a bank in London. Only I have the key. She gave it to me years ago just in case something happened to her. She was wise to worry. Finally, they heard sirens in the distance. Blue lights flashed through the windows. The police had arrived along with an ambulance. The kitchen suddenly filled with people, paramedics working on James, police officers asking questions, taking photographs, gathering evidence. Detective Inspector Morris, a tall woman with kind eyes, listened carefully to everyone's stories. She examined Margaret's evidence, including recordings Margaret had secretly made of James, talking about the murder to himself in his office. Margaret had broken into his office weeks ago, planted tiny recording devices, and waited for him to reveal himself. You've done some very illegal things, Mrs. Cooper, the detective said with a slight smile. Breaking and entering, unlawful surveillance, entrapment. I should arrest you. But you won't, Margaret replied confidently, because I've solved a murder that your department missed. And I've saved 3 innocent lives. The detective sighed. No, I won't arrest you. But don't do this again. Leave police work to the police. If the police had done their work properly, I wouldn't have needed to, Margaret said with a shrug. James was carried away on a stretcher. He would survive his injuries and face trial for murder and fraud. Rebecca wouldn't be charged. The evidence clearly showed self-defense. The knife had James's fingerprints on it, along with Rebecca's. The forensics would prove she had grabbed it from him during a struggle. As the police and paramedics finished their work, Sarah, Tom, and Rebecca sat together in the manor's old living room. Margaret had found some dusty bottles of wine in the cellar and poured them each a glass. To your grandmother, Margaret said, raising her glass, a wonderful woman who deserved better than the death she got. But at least now she has justice. They drank in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Sarah looked around the room at the old furniture, the faded wallpaper, the portraits of ancestors long dead. This house had seemed so magical when she was a child. Now it felt sad and haunted by terrible events. What will happen to this place? Tom asked quietly. Who owns it now? You do, Margaret answered, all 3 of you according to the real will. This house, along with most of your grandmother's fortune, belongs to you equally. Rebecca started crying again, but this time from relief and sadness mixed together. I don't want the money, she said. I just want grandmother back. I know, dear, Margaret said gently, patting her hand. We all do. But she would want you to have it. She would want you to be happy and secure. That's why she worked so hard to build her wealth, to take care of her family. Sarah felt tears on her own cheeks now. She hadn't cried yet tonight, too shocked by everything to process her emotions. But now it all came flooding out. The loss, the anger, the fear, and finally, the relief that justice had been served. Tom put his arm around his sister. "We'll get through this," he said softly. "Together. Like we always have." The storm outside began to calm. The first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day was beginning. Detective Morris came back into the room. "I need you all to come to the station later today to make official statements. But for now, you're free to go. I'd suggest you find a hotel and get some rest. This has been a traumatic night for everyone." "Can we stay here?" Sarah asked suddenly. "Just for today? I need to feel close to grandmother. I need to say goodbye properly." The detective considered this, then nodded. "The house isn't a crime scene. The crime happened years ago elsewhere. Just the kitchen is sealed off for now. You can stay in other rooms if you wish." After the police left, the four of them, Sarah, Tom, Rebecca, and Margaret, walked through the manor together. They went from room to room remembering stories, sharing memories of happier times. Margaret told them things about their grandmother they had never known, her secret charity work, her early life before marriage, her dreams and hopes. In the grandmother's bedroom on the third floor, they found more letters. She had written one to each of them, sealed and dated, meant to be opened on their birthdays for the next 5 years. Letters of advice, love, and wisdom from beyond the grave. They weren't ready to open them yet. That would come later, when the grief was less fresh. Sarah stood by the window looking out at the countryside. The sun was fully up now, making everything look clean and new. She thought about how her grandmother must have stood in this exact spot countless times, looking at this same view. She knew she was in danger, Sarah said to Margaret, who had joined her at the window. Why didn't she tell someone? Why didn't she call the police immediately? Pride, perhaps, Margaret replied. Or maybe she didn't want to believe someone she trusted could betray her so completely. James had been her lawyer for 20 years. He handled everything for her, finances, property, legal matters. She thought he was a friend. That makes it even worse, Sarah said bitterly. He used her trust to kill her. Yes, Margaret agreed, but don't let his evil poison your memories of her. Remember her as she was, strong, loving, generous, and wise. Remember the summers you spent here, the stories she told, the cookies she baked. Those memories are real and good. Hold on to them. They spent the rest of the day at the manor, cleaning and organizing. Tom found old photo albums, and they looked through pictures of family gatherings, holidays, and celebrations. Rebecca discovered her grandmother's recipe books, filled with handwritten notes and cooking tips. Sarah found a jewelry box with pieces she remembered her grandmother wearing. We should share these things, Sarah suggested. Take turns choosing items that mean something to us. They agreed, dividing treasures not by value but by emotional connection. Tom took their grandmother's old pocket watch, which she had worn on a chain. Rebecca chose a silver bracelet with tiny charms. Sarah selected a jade ring that her grandmother had promised her years ago. As afternoon turned to evening, Margaret prepared to leave. I've done what I needed to do, she said, gathering her coat and lamp. Your grandmother can rest peacefully now, and you three have your lives back. Wait, Sarah said. How can we thank you? You risked so much for us. Margaret smiled warmly. Love your lives. Be good to each other. Make your grandmother proud. That's all the thanks I need. She left quietly. walking down the long driveway to where her car was hidden. They watched from the window until she disappeared from sight. "She's an incredible woman," Tom said with admiration. "Crazy but incredible." "Like grandmother," Rebecca added with a small smile. That night they decided to stay at the manor one more time before returning to their normal lives. They built a fire in the old fireplace, made simple dinner from supplies they found in the pantry, and talked late into the night. They spoke about their plans for the house. Should they sell it? Keep it? Turn it into something useful? They couldn't decide immediately. The wounds were too fresh, the memories too mixed with pain and joy. "Let's wait," Sarah suggested. "Give ourselves time to grieve properly, to heal. Then we can make decisions about the house and the money. There's no rush." Tom and Rebecca agreed. Some things couldn't be forced or hurried. As Sarah lay in bed that night, in the same guest room she had used as a child, she thought about everything that had happened. In less than 24 hours, her entire understanding of her grandmother's death had been shattered and rebuilt. She had discovered murder, witnessed violence, learned terrible truths, and found unexpected justice. But more than that, she had rediscovered her connection to Tom and Rebecca. They had drifted apart in recent years, busy with their own lives. Now they were close again, bound together by shared trauma and shared inheritance. She heard soft footsteps in the hallway and tensed for a moment before recognizing Tom's familiar walk. He knocked gently on her door. "Can't sleep?" he asked, poking his head in. "Too much to process," Sarah admitted. Tom sat on the edge of her bed, like he used to do when they were children and scared of nightmares. "Do you think grandmother knew what would happen? That she knew James would kill her?" "Maybe," Sarah said thoughtfully. "She was smart enough to hide the real will, to give Margaret the key to write all those letters. She was preparing for something." "I wish she had fought harder," Tom said sadly. "I wish she had lived." "Me too," Sarah whispered. But she did fight in her own way. She left clues. She trusted Margaret to find the truth. She made sure we would eventually know what happened. Even in death, she was protecting us. Tom nodded slowly. "That sounds like her. Always planning ahead, always thinking of us first." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the old house settle and creak around them. Outside, an owl called in the darkness. The storm had passed completely now, leaving clear, starry skies. "Sarah," Tom said suddenly, "promise me something. Promise we'll stay close. No more years of barely talking, barely seeing each other. Family is too important. Grandmother knew that. That's why she brought us all together, even from beyond the grave." "I promise," Sarah said firmly, "and Rebecca too. We're family, we stick together." Tom hugged her and returned to his own room. Sarah lay back down, feeling more peaceful than she had in hours. Yes, terrible things had happened. Yes, they had lost someone precious. But they had also gained something valuable: each other. The next morning they left Midnight Manor together. Before they locked the door, Sarah took one last look inside. The house seemed different in daylight, less menacing, less haunted. It was just an old building with old memories, nothing more. "Goodbye, grandmother," she whispered. "Rest well. We'll take care of each other, just like you wanted." They drove to the police station and gave their formal statements. Detective Morris informed them that James Parker had confessed to everything. He was being charged with murder, fraud, and attempted murder. The case was solid. He would spend the rest of his life in prison. The real will was retrieved from the safety deposit box and validated by the courts. Everything their grandmother had owned was officially transferred to Sarah, Tom, and Rebecca. They were suddenly wealthy, though the money felt tainted by the circumstances. "We should do something good with it," Rebecca suggested during lunch at a cafe near the police station. "Something grandmother would approve of." "Like what?" Tom asked. "A foundation," Sarah said, the idea forming as she spoke. "A charity foundation in her name, to help elderly people who might be vulnerable to fraud or abuse. We could fund legal aid, education programs, support services." Tom and Rebecca liked the idea immediately. They spent the rest of lunch planning, making notes, getting excited. Their grandmother's death would lead to something positive. Her money would protect others from similar fates. Over the following months, they worked together to establish the foundation. They hired lawyers, accountants, and charity experts. They created programs and partnerships with existing organizations. The work was challenging but fulfilling. Sarah quit her boring office job and became the foundation's director. Tom, who was a teacher, started volunteering to give financial literacy classes to seniors. Rebecca, a nurse, organized health and safety workshops. They kept Midnight Manor but transformed it. Instead of selling the old house, they converted it into a retreat center for elderly people and their families. It became a place of healing and community, not isolation and fear. The kitchen where violence had occurred was completely renovated and turned into a cheerful dining room. The bedroom where their grandmother had died peacefully became a library filled with her favorite books. Margaret Cooper became an honorary board member of the foundation. She continued solving cold cases in her spare time. Though she promised Detective Morris she would stick to legal methods. She and Sarah became close friends, meeting regularly for tea and conversation. James Parker was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. At his trial, Sarah gave a victim impact statement that made several jurors cry. She spoke about her grandmother's kindness, her generosity, her love for family. She described the pain of losing her and the greater pain of learning she had been murdered by someone she trusted. "You didn't just kill one person," Sarah told James, looking directly at him. "You tried to kill our memories of her, our faith in justice, our ability to trust. But you failed. We're stronger now. And everything you tried to steal, we're using to help others. You've lost. Completely and forever." James showed no emotion during the statement. He was led away in handcuffs, and Sarah never saw him again. 2 years after that frightening night at Midnight Manor, Sarah stood in the manor's garden during the foundation's anniversary celebration. Hundreds of people had come, seniors who had been helped by their programs, volunteers who donated their time, donors who contributed money, and grateful families whose loved ones had been protected from fraud. Tom and Rebecca stood beside her, watching the celebration with satisfaction. They had accomplished something real and lasting. Their grandmother would have been proud. "Do you ever think about that night?" Rebecca asked quietly. "When I was standing there with the knife and everything seemed so terrible?" "Sometimes," Sarah admitted, "but not with fear anymore, with gratitude." "Gratitude?" Tom said in surprise. "Yes," Sarah explained, "because that night showed us what we're capable of. We faced something horrible and we survived. We found justice. We came together as family and we chose to create something good from something evil that's powerful." Rebecca smiled and squeezed Sarah's hand. Grandmother would say you're being too philosophical. Probably, Sarah laughed. But it's true, the worst night of our lives led to the best decision we ever made. As the sun set over Midnight Manor, casting golden light across the gardens and the happy crowd, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace. Her grandmother was gone, but her spirit lived on in the foundation, in the family bonds that had been strengthened, in the countless lives they were helping. Murder had brought them to Midnight Manor that stormy night, but love had kept them together and driven them forward. In the end, love was stronger than death, stronger than greed, stronger than evil. Sarah looked up at the third-floor window where she had first seen the mysterious light. Now it was open, curtains blowing gently in the breeze. She imagined her grandmother standing there smiling down at them, pleased with what they had built. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to the wind, "for everything." The celebration continued into the evening, full of laughter and joy and hope. Midnight Manor, once a place of secrets and death, had become a symbol of justice and new beginnings. And 3 grandchildren brought together by tragedy had discovered that family wasn't just about blood or inheritance. It was about showing up for each other, protecting each other, and building something meaningful together. That was their grandmother's true legacy. Not the money or the property, but the love that bound them together and the good they could do in the world. And that legacy would live forever